So today, we're going to dive into 17th century America. We're looking at the foundational conditions, the quiet, powerful forces that really set the stage for everything that came after. And trust me, this isn't just a history lesson. It's about getting to the very roots of the world we live in now.
Just let that sink in for a second. Before engines, before electricity, life literally ran on a different clock. This wasn't a world of instant connections and machines. It was a world governed by the seasons, by the sun, and by the raw power of nature itself.
So what did that world actually feel like to live in? Well, it was a reality defined not by what was possible, but by what was physically limiting. It was all about constraints.
Your only power came from your own body, your animals, maybe a river or a fire. Everything was local. Everything was finite. And it all had to be built from the ground up, literally tree by tree. For pretty much everyone, life boiled down to one thing: farming. Simple as that. If you didn't farm, you starved.
But here's the thing. This world of really strict limits, it had this massive central paradox right at its heart. A tension that shaped every single decision and every struggle in the colonies. So on one side, you've got this incredible, almost unbelievable abundance. Land that just seems to stretch on forever. Endless forests, rivers teeming with fish. But then you flip the coin, and on the other side, total human vulnerability. There just weren't enough people to do the work, and disease and starvation were constant, deadly threats.
And that paradox, that tension, it created the single biggest problem the colonies had to solve: finding people to do the work.
Think about it. This was the core economic puzzle. Back in Europe, if you didn't own land, you worked for a landlord. That was the deal. But in America, why on earth would you bust your back for meager wages when, in theory, you could go out and claim your own piece of land? This question forced the colonies to find new, and as we'll see, increasingly brutal solutions.
So, the search for an answer, well, it went down a really dark and tragic path. At first, you had indentured servitude, Europeans trading a few years of their life for a boat ride over. Kind of like a temporary Band-Aid. But as the huge plantations started to grow and the demand for cash crops like tobacco just exploded, that system couldn't keep up. And so the colonies turned to a permanent, inherited, and racialized system of chattel slavery, forcibly bringing Africans to America and building an entire economy on their stolen labor. So now you've got two key ingredients: seemingly endless land and a system of forced labor. And with those in place, the colonies started building this powerful, really aggressive new economic engine. Now, this engine didn't run the same way everywhere. Not at all. Up in New England, you're dealing with rocky soil, which led to small family farms just trying to survive. But down south, in the Chesapeake, totally different story. The fertile land gave rise to these massive plantations growing tobacco, a cash crop that plugged the colonies right into the global market. And it created this relentless hunger for more land and more labor.
And you got to understand, America wasn't some isolated outpost. No way. It was a key piece in this vast, sprawling Atlantic system. It shipped out raw materials like tobacco and timber, and in return, it imported manufactured goods. And, most tragically, people, who were treated as just another commodity in this brutal triangle of trade.
But this rapid economic growth, this relentless expansion, it didn't just happen. It had a price. A devastating human price. And that price was paid first and foremost by the people who had called this land home for millennia.
Yeah, there's really no other way to say it. For the indigenous nations here, the arrival of Europeans and the expansion of their colonies unleashed an absolute catastrophe.
You see, it was a perfect storm of devastation. European diseases, things like smallpox, just ripped through communities that had zero immunity. And you combine that with constant warfare, broken promises, and just having your land stolen from under you. The result was this tragic, unbelievable collapse of indigenous populations right across the continent. So, as the 17th century starts to wind down, you can see all these threads: the paradox of abundance, the systems of labor, the engine of trade, the cost of expansion. They're all weaving together, creating the groundwork for a future that nobody back then could have possibly imagined.
Sure, America was still a pre-industrial world, all muscle and wood, but the character, the personality of the society that would one day welcome the machine age, that was already being formed.
Think about it. The experience of the 1600s created a culture that didn't just want growth, it expected it. Expansion wasn't some special event. It was the baseline, the norm.
And how was that growth fueled? Well, it was fueled by extraction, by taking value from the land and, of course, from people.
This wasn't just a business model. It became part of the American DNA, socially and economically.
And all of this built a really crucial mindset, the idea that nature wasn't something you just coexisted with. No, it was something to be conquered, to be cleared, tamed, and turned into profit. And that belief, it made America uniquely hungry, a place that was perfectly primed for what was coming next: coal, steam, and iron.
Which brings us to the most important takeaway here. Revolutions don't just happen. They don't start with a big bang. They begin with conditions. And the Industrial Revolution? Its roots were sunk deep in the quiet, brutal, and world-changing conditions of the 17th century. The hunger, the systems, the mindset, it was all in place, just waiting for a spark.
And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to chew on, doesn't it? If the 1600s were setting the stage for the Industrial Age, what are the quiet conditions, the powerful forces at play right now that are shaping the revolutions of our own future?